Hello and welcome to another edition of Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham and I am joined by Osceola recruiting analyst Charles Fishbein. We were supposed to be joined by former FSU offensive lineman and Osceola football analyst Mark Salva, but they are having some weather issues in Nashville. Mark's having some internet problems. They're having severe storms. So it'll just be me and Fish today as we preview FSU's defensive end room. And Fish, I guess where we want to start is probably with the one guy that we did not anticipate being back for this year, at least at the end of the bowl game, and that is Jared Verse. Took him about a month, well, not quite a month, but a month from the end of the season in the end of January before he made up his mind to come back. I think he announced it on right around January 1st. But just your thoughts on Jared Verse coming back.
It's a huge get back. It's basically like landing a 5-star recruit out of high school. Jared is a kid that we both thought coming out of Albany that he would struggle a little bit early on, then eventually in the second half of last year take it to that next level and go into another year where he would be one of their top guys coming off that edge. But he came out of the gate real fast against LSU, exploded on the scene. He was one of the best pass rushers in the country. I really didn't think he'd come back, just mainly because those guys are very, everybody in the country wants a pass rusher, especially in the NFL with the way the game's played. He had the traits that they're looking for: size, speed, athleticism, very twitchy off the edge. He could do so much. He's a rare guy, kind of like a unicorn, just very special. One of these guys that pro scouts are looking for. And I was, kind of blown away that he decided to come back for his another season at Florida State.
Yeah, and listen, I think to some extent, I think we both were. We had spoken with a scout from the NFL who had suggested that he was under, his opinion was that he had been to a Florida State game, which is where I talked to him, that, Jared needed to come back. He still thought Jared would go. So I think he was even surprised by that because there was some potential for him to possibly slide up into the early second round, late first round, because as he said, no football team has 32 first-round picks on their board. Defensive ends tend to slide up, so do corners and safety these days. So, the good news is whether it was a byproduct of his draft grade that he got from the NFL or a combination of draft grade and NIL, certainly worked to Florida State's benefit. And as you said, is a big boost for Florida State's defense because, as we saw, he is a difference maker. He finished with 9 sacks, which I believe was 17th in the country, and then he finished 11th in tackles for loss, and obviously missed some time, not only full games, but also, missed times in games because he was not as healthy as he would like him to be. And of course, he'll be a second year in Adam Fuller's system. You would expect him to be more productive. He'll have a full off season with Florida State. Spring and summer. So, listen, it bodes well for him. It bodes well for the FSU defense, and certainly glad that worked out for him. And just so you guys know that are listening, we've kind of got some projections. And at the Fox defensive end, which is where Jared played last year, we have him, Gilber Edmonds, the University of South Carolina transfer, Brian Turner Jr. is returning, and obviously Jaden Jones was signed out of Hutchinson Junior College in Hutchinson, Kansas. Listen, he had a knee injury this past fall at Hutchinson, is expected to be limited during spring. We do not know how much we'll see him. And, of course, the other great news for FSU is they are going to return the ACC Rookie of the Year on defense, and that's Patrick Payton at the other end. And we have him lined up with in front of Derek McClendon, Aaron Hester, Dante Anderson, and Lamont Green. And we know that some of these guys will cross-train, probably not Payton and Verse. They kind of seem like they're set at their spots. They should be there. Both were outstanding in 2022. You would think that they'll only be better. Patrick Payton, listen, we all thought he's long, lean. We think at least I do. And I think you probably feel the same, Fish. Like you've got all our ACC defensive rookie of the year coming back who will benefit greatly from another offseason, putting on weight until that rather long frame. What are your expectations for Patrick this spring and heading into the fall?
Yeah, I really want Patrick to hit that weight room hard this offseason. I really think he can take the game to another level, but he needs to become bigger and stronger. You saw at times he did a very good job as a pass rusher. In space, he's very good, but when he locked up and engaged with an offensive lineman, an offensive tackle in the run game, he would get pushed around. So I think if he can get bigger and stronger, especially in the lower body, create a stronger base, he'll be tougher to run against. Of the two, versus a little, is more physically developed, of course. So when you put these guys together, they give you two guys that could come off the edge, rush the passer. But like I said, you want Patrick to get a little bigger and stronger so he can help out in the run game where he did struggle at times last year.
Yeah, and then of course, you've got Derek McClendon who lined up behind him, and there were a lot of questions about Derek coming into last season, and he kind of accounted for himself very well in 2022. Finished 8th on the team in tackles with 37, and 3rd on team sacks. He played the 5th most snaps on defense last season. So certainly, how do you feel about the depth there behind Patrick? Listen, we're assuming that Derek will line up behind him, and then we're projecting Dante Anderson, Lamont Green Jr. What are your thoughts on that? On that position group on the strong side of the defense?
Well, I think FSU has some guys that are versatile that can play both defensive end and outside. I think someone like we've seen Dennis Briggs, he's played at both positions. These guys, they kind of are versatile. They don't like to just have one guy kind of like a Cooper who was just strictly a nose guard. They have these guys that could kind of play multiple positions in certain situations. McClendon's one of those guys that he does a very good job against the run. He's a stronger kid than Peyton at this point because he's been in the program a little longer. I think he did take his game to another level. Coming into last season, you even wondered if this was a guy that was going to potentially transfer down the road because he wasn't getting a whole lot of playing time. And he did very well last year, and he's important to that depth because the guys behind him, Hester, Anderson, and Lamont Green, don't have a lot of experience. So behind Peyton, the only guy that really has that experience is McClendon. So if those two guys can stay healthy and you could develop that depth on the back end, you could have a pretty good group overall at this defensive end spot.
Yeah, and the guy I'm really excited about seeing, the two guys really are the new guys, Gilber Edmond and Jaden Jones. Now, obviously, we're not expecting to see much of Jaden during spring because of that injury. But listen, if you watch Gilber Edmond's South Carolina tape, he's long, athletic, can really run, can play defensive end, stand up, hand down. We saw him do that at South Carolina. The other thing to talk about is athleticism and speed. Other thing South Carolina would do with him in nickel and dime packages is sometimes line him up at inside linebacker and let him drop into coverage. So obviously this is a guy that can play in space and they feel has the ability to cover a lot of ground. How excited are you about seeing Gilber? His addition to this defense, and what have you seen what do you think the strong suit of his game will be once he gets in the Florida State system?
Yeah, I mean, he gives you some more speed off the edge. I think Gilbert's a little more athletic than Derek. I think he's somewhere in between Derek and Verse. I don't think he's as good as Verse, but I think that his ceiling and upside is better than Derek McClendon. So he gives you another body, another guy, played a lot of snaps. Even you look at the guys they brought in, a lot of these guys have experience, and that's going to help their overall depth because if you have a guy that goes down for a couple plays or even a series or a game, you could bring that other guy in, and there's not going to be that much of a drop-off. So bringing Gilber in is huge. I think it just enhances what they already have, which was a strength with both Patrick and Verse coming back. This guy is going to just produce, give them some production behind those two other guys, and I think that helps them as they get deeper in the year. You know how this is. You can't ever have enough depth on the O-line and D-line. These guys are going to get beat up, so you want guys to rotate, be fresh, and be able to stay away from those nagging injuries.
Yeah, now I do want to talk to you. You've followed Lamont Green Jr. for a long time. He's down there from your neck of the woods and obviously one of FSU's highest-rated recruits. It's very hard for a true freshman to play. Florida State has had to play some of them, both at the end of Willie's tenure and obviously at the start of Mike's because of where they were from a roster standpoint. But I think the best thing for Lamont Green Jr. is to get in the weight room. I think it's more important what happens with him on the weight room and on the training table than necessarily the football field this spring. Kind of what's your expectations for Lamont? Listen, it's a big step up in competition coming from his high school to Florida State. There's always a transitional period for any young player. And listen, Florida State's going to have some good defensive ends, and the kids that you're going to be going against in practice are much better than they have been in the past. So what's kind of your expectations for Lamont Green Jr.?
As well as I do, as far as being around a college football program, a lot of the stuff as far as these guys playing, a lot of it's mental. I know the physical part's important, is the mental side. I think Lamont's a smart kid. He's been around football his whole life with his father. I think he's someone that could give you anywhere from 10 maybe to 15 snaps a game, give you a pass rush on a 3rd and 15. You want to bring a fresh body in, a guy that has some twitch, could get off that ball quickly, could get in that backfield, maybe get a sack, strip, fumble, return type guy. He's a big play guy. He gets a lot. He got a lot of sacks in high school. I think from that pass rush standpoint, he could give you something, especially in games that are maybe where Florida State has a lead and they could get him some reps. Yes, he needs to get in that weight room, but he has that body and frame. You've seen him. He's a wide-bodied. If you look at his shoulders, he's real wide and long, and his frame's going to be able to put on weight. And he's a hard-working kid. I don't think he's really ever had a true weight program. I mean, Gulliver's a nice school and everything, but nothing like Florida State. I think once he gets into Florida State's weight program, this is a guy I think will put on weight quickly. I think he could get to 235, 240 before next season. And it may seem like a lot for most people, but he's someone that works hard. I think he could put on that weight. And I like what he can bring to the table. Even next year as an inexperienced guy, I think his ability to rush the passer is just too good to keep him off the field.
Yeah. Now, how big a spring do you think this is for a guy like Aaron Hester, redshirt freshman? He's really not defensive end size, 6'2", 233, but he's not really a linebacker. How do you see him fitting into Adam Fuller's system as he continues his career at Florida State?
Yeah, I'm curious. FSU needs some help at linebacker. If they could get a guy that could kind of be a stand-up outside rush and outside linebacker, they could put him in space, do the things that they expected from Amari Gaynor or some of those guys that have been at that position, but better. I think he has ability. We watched it at the summer camp 2 years ago, but he is kind of like a squatty short. He doesn't have super long arms. He's not Lamont Green Jr., but he has ability. He has to find a position in this defense. Hopefully he doesn't get lost like Amari Gaynor did, because Amari had athletic ability and he had the physical attributes. He just never found that fit in this defense. Hopefully Hester is able to overcome some of that and find that position. But I think he's more, like I said, an outside linebacker, rush end. Maybe you put him off that edge, let him go after the quarterback too in certain situations. But he needs to have a good season. I think even if he's not a starter, I just think you want some of these guys like Hester to get reps, to be part of the team, because you don't want them to get frustrated and then all of a sudden they end up in the transfer portal.
Yeah. And then, of course, you've got Byron Turner Jr., redshirt sophomore, 6'4", 237. Listen, he was a kid that out of high school was, when you watch his film, extremely quick off the ball in his third year. How important is this spring to his future as being a candidate to be in the rotation for next year?
Hey, yeah, like we talked about it, there's no time to be wasted anymore. It's like, you got to get, be productive now. I think this kid does need to have a good spring, so he has confidence going into next year. He's another guy that needs to get reps. He needs to get on that field. He needs to get productive. If not, he's someone that could get recruited over. The ability's there. Another guy that has the ability. A lot of it's not that ability. It's that want to, that sense of urgency. He needs to understand that this is an important spring and really put in the time and get better and get into that rotation next year.
Yeah, and now listen, I don't want to get into – there's probably going to be some guys that we are projecting as defensive tackles that might be able to come in and compete at defensive end. I've heard people talk about the fact that Braden Fisk has played outside in pass rush situations at Western Michigan. I think he's inside all the way, but that's just me. There may be some other guys. But listen, and we're going to get into the individuals on the defensive tackles in one of our next podcasts. But Fish, they have added some horses in there inside, and they've got some kids with a ton of potential coming back, some young guys, and we'll talk about them later individually. But we do expect that the defensive tackles could be dominating next year if everyone plays up to their full potential and continues to progress. That being said, without getting into specifics on them individually, how can that benefit a Jared Verse and a Patrick Payton and a Gilber Edmond and Jaden Jones and Derek McClendon next fall?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that's so important, and you saw with the Kansas City Chiefs with Chris Jones, when you have guys inside that can push the pocket back where a quarterback gets uncomfortable. Quarterbacks like to be able to step up in the pocket, slide in the pocket to their left or right, and be able to make throws. If you take that away and they're forced to just keep going back, those edge rushers eventually are going to get to that quarterback. So if these guys can create a pass rush or a push up the middle, it only makes Verse's job and a Patrick Payton's job that much easier, because they're going to get a good jump off the ball. Now, if they're facing a quarterback that's just drifting back, it's just going to make it easier for them to make plays, make big plays. I think the interior of the D line's huge this year. I think that's where FSU needs to improve, not only from a talent standpoint, I think from a depth standpoint. And if those guys that they brought in and the guys that they have in that middle do what they need to do, Verse and Payton could have double-digit sacks, both of them.
Now, how much better do you feel about the defensive end room relative to how you felt about it going into the 2022 season?
Last year, I was very nervous because you lost a Jermaine Johnson, who was, they plucked out of the transfer portal, ended up a first-round pick, and his impact. I thought, we talked about it a million times, I thought Verse had the talent. I didn't think he'd do it last year or even as quickly as he did. So once he was able to show that ability of being able to put pressure on the quarterback and do those things, that some of those concerns went away. Nobody could have expected for them to be that good off the edge, especially with Verse last year after losing a first-round pick. So going into this year, I feel a lot more comfortable. Not only do they have Verse, they got Patrick Payton, who showed last year in limited time that he could put pressure on the quarterback. They got quality depth with Edmonds and Derek McClendon coming back. They got 4 guys to rotate off that edge, and that's not even talking some of the younger guys. So They got 4 guys they could key on. Like we've said, you could take a Briggs in certain situations. You could take a Braden Frisk and in certain situations where you could play them on the outside. They got 4 to 6 guys, no matter how you mix it up, 4 to 6 guys they could rely on the outside, and they didn't have that last year. They really had going into the season maybe 1, and you're stretching it with 2. So this year they have more depth, they have more talent. They're going to be able to rotate guys in and out, keep them fresh. And that's the one thing we've talked about this over and over, is when you get into that second half of your season, guys get beat up, and this is going to give them the ability to stay fresh throughout the whole year. If these guys could stay healthy, FSU is a very deep team on the defensive line next year.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the defensive end position, you'd probably like them to be between the 2 positions, at least a rotation of 5, right? We think that's where they are. We think obviously Verse and Payton proven commodities. McClendon's proven himself to be more than a capable backup. Then of course you got Gilber Edmond, who has proven himself at South Carolina and SEC. So it really is going to be about Gilber Edmond learning the system along with Jaden Jones, and then who takes that next step out of the younger guys? Is it Byron Turner Jr.? Is it Aaron Hester? Is it Dante Anderson or Lamont Green? So, I agree with you. I think they've got a chance to be better than they were last year at defensive end. It's going to be fun to see what the rep counts are in spring. You would think that, Verse would not practice as much as, say, a Edmond, a Turner, even a Payton for that matter. But, getting Edmond in depth into the defense. That's not the right word, but anyway, you know what I'm saying. But anyway, so I think it's going to be an exciting spring for the defensive ends. Fish, as always, appreciate you joining me. We will be back again soon with another position update, probably Monday, the defensive tackles. I know the running backs are coming out Saturday. Don't know if Fish and I will be a part of that, but we will certainly have another video preview coming out in association with the written previews for each position. But we will be back later in the week, and thank you for joining us on Seminole Sidelines, and we will be back with the running backs and defensive tackles next. And appreciate you joining us. We hope you enjoyed it. Thanks, Fish.
No problem.